Under the Constitution, the KDF is strictly bound by the principles of national security as defined under Article 238 of the Constitution, which is they have to be subject to the authority of the Constitution and Parliament, and that the national security activities must be carried in strict compliance with the law and with utmost respect for the rule of law, and that in performance of its functions and exercise of their powers, the KDF shall respect the diverse culture of the communities within Kenya. Mr. Speaker, again on the modalities, under the KDF Act, the Cabinet Secretary at any one time is required to furnish the National Assembly with reports on deployments under Article 241, 3B and C, as I have already stated. And these reports to Parliament are required to have the details as to the reason for deployment, the place and duration of deployment, as well as the accessible for the administration, control, and overall superintendence of the operation. But where KDF is deployed in a joint operation in support of the National Police Service and other authorities in situations of emergency, the Inspector General of the National Police Service shall be responsible for the control and overall superintendence of the operations. And again, to bring it closer home, an example is for the control. And the KDF focus on internal deployment in support of the National Police Service. Other statutory regulations and measures that need to be instituted includes compliance with the constitutional standards, requirement for the Cabinet Secretary to, within 24 hours, issue a notice in the Gazette on the commencement of such deployment, and do the same upon discontinuation. Deployment and discontinuation, again, may be performed only in areas and places where the national security arbitrary that must be adhered to in the as the ministry has put in place, to ensure that the future involvement of KDF in addressing instability or civilian unrest is timely, to avert death that may arise, and from the shortcomings of the other national security institutions. Mr. Speaker, in response to question 3, the KDF is structured to ensure continuous state of mission readiness, allowing for swift and effective response to both external and internal threats when the need arises. However, in its participation in internal security operations, these are carefully guided by the Constitution and the KDF Act, which specify notifications through Gazette notice, authorization to be sought prior to the deployment, and the mandatory reports to be furnished to the National Assembly, and of course, close collaboration and cooperation with the necessary security institutions. Question 4, Mr. Speaker, on how the KDF does balance the internal security needs of the state and the sanctity of civilians' lives when dealing with internal instability or unrest. Mr. Speaker, the involvement of KDF in internal security matters, as I have said, is governed under the Constitution and the law, KDF Act. Section 3 of the Act provides that KDF shall, in fulfilling its mandate, observe and uphold the Bill of Rights, values, and principles under the Constitution in terms of striving for the highest standards of professionalism and discipline among its members. KDF is also to comply with constitutional standards of human rights and fundamental freedoms and dignity, as well as the requirement for sufficient training of staff before such deployments. Mr. Speaker, guided by the aforesaid constitutional and statutory dictates, the KDF is deeply committed to professionalism and operates within customary rules of engagement that prioritize the protection of civilians. And this approach entails the employment of non-lethal methods whenever possible, and the use of the laid out standard operating procedures. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Tomo Jenda, you may ask your 2 supplementary questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a follow-up supplementary question. Let me thank the CS Defense, Madam the Honorable Soipan Tuya, Senator, for the response to the structured questions. However, Mr. Speaker, just one question I want the CS to highlight. No doubt, Mr. Speaker, reference is made to parliamentary approval for intervention and to keeping with the tenets under Article 241(3) and the involvement of the national. The CS to clarify, and this is the delicate line, between inability of the National Police Service to deal with internal struggle for KDF to intervene when there's a real threat and the National Police Service is unable to contain the threat. And I'm asking this, Mr. Speaker, because at times an intervention can be a little too late. And lastly, Madam CS, food security, security in a wider sense. And KDF, the KDF of that country, is involved, spends most of its time in food production, other than, whatever it is, spends more time in food production and other activities other than just staying in the barracks until there is a threat of security to the country. Do other things, to ensure that we take care of the other issues, other security issues, other than simply fighting.
Honorable CS, note down those 2 questions. You will take more, and then when you raise to respond, you respond to them at a go. Senator Sifuna.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Madam CS, I saw a very curious statement from your ministry on the 17th of March 2025 regarding the circumstances surrounding the deployment of KDF in July of 2024. As you know, I am a firm believer in the freedom of the media. And we must accept that we were all very concerned to see the army in the streets after the protests. And my party leader has addressed certain possibilities given histories in other places, including Sudan and Egypt. What, in your view, or in the view of the ministry, was inaccurate in the report by the Daily Nation regarding the very possibility of this country being handed over to the military? The report by the Daily Nation was false, baseless, misleading, and reckless. Please explain to me what was the basis of that conclusion by your ministry. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Chute Mohammed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Let me thank the CS for her eloquency, and we are really proud of you. My question would be a bit of our discussion today. There is a court case. No. Let me align it back again, please, Honorable Speaker. I am bringing it back. There is a court case that was brought by one Mr. Murusi in Karare on the land that was acquired by KDF. And the court ruled that KDF should vacate that property. Can the minister please tell us what action she has taken so far, because the people of Karare want to know when the KDF are going to vacate that land. Thank you very much.
Senator Eddy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My supplementary question is on question number 3, set by the Senator of Kisumu, Senator Ojienda. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to know from the CS, at a point where the national security has failed, whether because of capacity or other misgivings, and then KDF has come in, like what we saw last year during the Gen Z protests. KDF has taken over to make sure that they can ensure there is peace and there is stability. Do they also take over the mess that has been created by inadequacy of the national security organ? Like the messes that we saw where, for instance, young people were killed and property were destroyed. Does that assumption only limit KDF to the issue of dealing with restoring peace, or does it extend to dealing with the mess that has been created at that time by the national security organ? And if that is so, then what does the ministry think of dealing with the mess that was created at that time, including what this House passed on the resolution of compensating young people who were affected and were killed during that protest? And this House has pronounced itself through a resolution on dealing with those messes. Is the ministry taking over that because the national security organs failed as demonstrated? Thank you, Chair.
Senator Kathuri.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And she was appointed as CS. She was one of us in this House, Mr. Speaker. And she has not let us down this far. So, Mr. Speaker, my question is, actually first is to really congratulate the KDF joint operation in the North Rift and the National Police Service, because they restored norms in the North Rift, Baringo area, Samburu, the Baragoi area. For the first time, shops are open in that area, Mr. Speaker. So I really want to thank them for that joint operation. But, Honorable Speaker, the other areas, sometimes I get restrained to talk about other areas, especially where I come from, Mr. Speaker. But to request whether the National Security Council can also consider also deploying the KDF to other areas which have similar problems with the North Rift, especially the border between Nyambene region of Meru County and the Isiolo Samburu border, Mr. Speaker. If they can at least consider even doing an operation to wipe out or to weed out the illegal arms which are in that area. Mr. Speaker, because what happened, to give them a hand start, is when the bandits left North Rift and Samburu, the only safe haven that they have now is the Isiolo, the Samburu, bordering Meru, and that region. So they left North Rift and came to our region, Mr. Speaker. So they are really terrorizing us, and whether maybe they can consider bringing the same operation in that Mbunda so that also our people can live in peace, Honorable Speaker. I thank you.
Senator Kamau.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also ask a supplementary question. Honorable Speaker, I wanted to know from the Minister, what is the Minister of Defense doing, and whether the CS is aware that on 13th of March 2025, a heavily armed militia, believed to be Al-Shabaab, invaded a village in Mangai, in Kiunga, a village in Mangai, in Basuba Ward, in Lamu County, and that they were in pursuit of an area chief and NPR, who helps in maintaining law and order in that area. Honorable Speaker, it is believed that the militia got an opportunity to address members of the public and force them to even take the days that they were having. Honorable Speaker, since then, the members of the public have been living in fear, in that area, of not knowing where the militias will strike next and what will happen. Honorable Speaker, I wanted to know from the minister, what is the ministry doing to see to it that they safeguard those citizens that live in those areas? Final question, Mr. Speaker. I want
entitled
it is
only one.
in addition to that. It
No,
is
you cannot add, Honorable Senator.
I'm finishing, Honorable Speaker. Let me finish.
Already finished.
Kindly,
Senator
it is
Boni.
very-
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to request the CS to take, when you go back to the generals, to take our greetings and our appreciation for their professionalism and discipline as a unit of security in this country. Having said that, I'm a little bit apprehensive listening to you and reading the Constitution. It is not clear. Minister, once the forces are deployed, what self-propelling mechanism has the National Security Council put in place to ensure that once they are deployed, they do not roll into taking over government?
Senator Wambua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you cannot fail to notice that Senator Medhu today is very, very well dressed. The hair looks good. Mr. Speaker, there's one thing, Mr. Speaker, that I have not told you. It's a lot of things I have not told you. I have not told this House. That at some point in my life, I lived in the barracks. My father is a former Army officer, that time Army, Kenya Army. And so matters security and matters defense are very close to my heart. Mr. Speaker, the world over, armies are trained basically to do three things. Basically, whether it's explicit or not, but basically do three things. One is to fight. Two is to kill. And three is to die for the motherland. That is the basic training of any army anywhere in the world, including Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I would want to know from the CS, our colleague, Senator Soipan Tuya. When in July 2024, the KDF was unleashed on our streets, first of all, what battalion is it that was released to the streets? What was the mandate of their mission? Because the mandate must be very, very clear. As a Speaker, the Gazette notice that released the KDF to the streets, has it been revoked, or are they in the streets in perpetuity? The Speaker, I thank you.
Senator Mungatana.
Mr. Speaker, when the minister was answering, she gave two examples and said in the North Rift, the General of Police was in charge and the defense forces were supporting. In our neighbor, Lamu County, when they were doing a money burning operation, it is the Chief of Defense Forces who was in command. The question I wanted to ask the minister, we have the highest respect for our defense forces as a nation, and the discipline and the respect We admire them. But what we wanted to know, in fact, the question is not it very well. Why is it that you don't have a law specific for that? You don't quote the Constitution. Constitution gives general principles. Why don't you have a law specific on deployment of the army for civilian purposes? And the reason I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, is that when you go to some projects, even construction projects, you are told these ones are not going to be advertised. It's the army which will do it. We have no doubt that the army can do it. But why isn't there a proper legal framework which is going to be, debated by the representatives of the people and made clear? And this is a suggestion, the application of how...
Senator Majaya.
Asante mstahiki Spika. Mstahiki Spika, nataka kuuliza swali kwa waziri. Waziri, swali ambalo nataka kuuliza ni kwamba kuna sehemu kubwa sana ni Army Barracks imeweza kutupwa nje na wamejaribu sana kuweza kupata hiyo ardhi yao na mpaka hivi sasa bado hawajaipata. Wizara yako imechukua hatua gani kuona kwamba lile shamba ambalo ile familia imedhulumiwa pale Mariakani na alafu imedhulumiwa na wanajeshi ambao wananchi sasa hawawezi kufanya chochote kwa sababu ni wanajeshi ndio wanaketi hapo, na ile shamba na hakika unajua ya kwamba ile shamba wakati army ikienda pale wananchi wenyewe walikuwa wanaishi pale kama familia. Ni hatua gani umechukua kuregesha hiyo shamba kwa wale wakaazi ama wenyewe hiyo shamba wanaoishi hapo Mariakani ile familia? Umefanya hatua gani kuona kwamba hiyo shamba imeweza kurudi kwao? Asante.
Senator Mundege. Senator Murgo.
Once in a while, we get a reaction. There is no perfection yet. You will find that maybe one of those thugs will go to one side and do something that is unexpected. Beat people all over generally, and even kill and shoot cows and all this. Could this be a matter of a camp or a unit overstaying in a place until probably they begin to not be up to what they went for? Because it seems like they are now not up to what they went for, but other things that are equally violent.
Senator Mofire.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question is to our former colleague, CS Soipan Tuya. Honorable Speaker, there is a very old tradition in this country that whenever we have a recruitment, especially the military recruitment, there is a lot of hue and cry from the public. Where people will go to an extent of even disposing their property to get money to pay for that recruitment, get their sons and daughters recruited in the military. We have had cases where parents have lost money through fraudsters. Get somebody who has requests you to get him some money so that maybe your son or daughter can be recruited in the military. In this case, Honorable Speaker, we have denied his doing because this is cancerous. It has been with us for a very long time. I don't know. I have not even captured any sentiment from the ministry for that matter and raising that pertinent issue that is affecting our parents across the country.
Honorable CS to respond, Honorable Senators, allow me to remind you that a supplementary question is a question that flows from the primary question. Now, the questions by Senator would qualify to be supplementary questions. However, I will allow the Honorable CS, if she's able to add, if you're not in a position, you can undertake to provide a more detailed response to those three questions. Honorable CS, you may now take the floor.
But I will give an attempt to respond to all of them adequately. And I'll go in order of the way they were posed to me. The question by the Honorable Senator Tom Ojenda on what the threshold is for the KDF stepping in to contain threats, internal threats, in support of the National Police Service. And Mr. Speaker, I had demonstrated that there is a continuous engagement between the national security, and we deal with situational analysis of security situations on a very regular basis. So this is just to assure the country and this House that intervention of the national security challenges that emerge. The second question, Mr. Speaker, was asked by, I'm sorry, I did not indicate the name of the senator, who was asking what other duties, no, this is Senator Ojenda still, what other duties, apart from the KDF sitting to wait for
Senator Ojenda, may you listen to the CS in silence.
The Honorable Senator, Professor, Senior Counsel Tom Ojenda, Senator for Kisumu County. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, the KDF, our soldiers don't just sit in the barracks. There is a lot of involvement in humanitarian and civic activities all across the country in support of communities, and this is in the area of water security, school infrastructure, and roads. And I'm sure we can attest to this at the various levels of involvement of the KDF in different parts of the country. Mr. Speaker, we also have a very serious defense industry unit of the KDF, where we have semi-autonomous government agencies, an example being the Kenya Meat Commission, a number of activities away from fighting and the core mandate of our personnel. Mr. Speaker, the question by the Senator of Nairobi, Honorable Sifuna, or the article only say that it is indeed baseless, it is inaccurate, and reckless. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, question by Senator Chute, in as much as it has been declared inadmissible by the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are seized of the matter of the Karare land, and I want to appreciate the support of the Senator. We have had discussion. We are going to advance the discussions as agreed, Mr. Speaker, and we will need the support of the leadership of Marsabit County, because the military base that is intended to be set up in Marsabit is for the interest of the Kenyans, the Kenya population in general, and more specifically, those communities affected by insecurity situations in Marsabit. The other interests espoused by the different parties are also pertinent, and we are going to address that through the means that we have agreed on. Honorable Senator for Migori, on the question of the limits of what KDF should and can do once deployed, Mr. Speaker, the definition of deployment is very clear. It does not undertake any form of arrest or dealing with any internal criminal liability issues. There are institutions that are tasked with that mandate, and the role of the KDF then is restricted to restoring. The Honorable Deputy Speaker, Senator Kaduri, thank you for admitting that the support of KDF to the National Police Service is indeed working in the North Rift, and this has been attested to by the Senator for West Pokot County. We appreciate that feedback. And I want to say that, unfortunately, we also cannot be everywhere as KDF. But like I said, in instances where the insecurity has gone down in the North Rift but is escalating in other parts of the country, that is noted, Mr. Speaker, and these are the issues that are in constant deliberation between the national security organs, and where need be, and the procedures are very clear, KDF, if called upon, will then come in to support the National Police Service in the areas that were stated, Isiolo, Meru, and these other parts of the country where the internal strife seems to be escalating, in as much as the North Rift is looking good. Senator Thuku of Lamu, the incident, a very fresh incident of March 13th. Yes, I'm aware of the incident in Kiunga, and it is a matter that is actively under investigation. And like I said, the KDF is actively deployed in Lamu under the Operation Amani Boni, and I will therefore not wish to comment on the processes that are undergoing with regards to this specific case of invasion in Lamu that involved the chiefs and other people in the area. But Mr. Speaker, I would like the Senator to rest assured that the matter is actively under investigation, and I'm sure he knows, as the Senator of Lamu, how to plug himself in and know what is happening, and I invite him to have a discussion outside this house. The Honorable Senator for Kakamega County, I will pass the greetings to the generals, and they could, most probably they are watching, and thank you for appreciating their role. The scope and duration for deployment of KDF is clearly spelled out. Even the deployment that happened on June 25th, you know it involves a court matter, which is still active in court. And the scope, as defined by the Constitution and the relevant laws, cannot allow for a degeneration, because even the duration is clearly defined as to how long the KDF then continue to be deployed in these situations. The National Security Council is also properly designed to monitor constantly, and remember, this is a multi-agency outfit, to make sure that the deployments remain within the confines of the Constitution. Senator for Kitui County, Honorable Wambua, the question on the confines of the operation, I think the question is as to whether the Gazette still subsists for the deployment of June 25th. The parameters for June 25th are very clear, again, like I mentioned. There is a court case. There were Gazette notices, 2 Gazette notices issued by the Cabinet Secretary then, defining, as required by the court directive, defining the scope, the duration, and the confines within which the KDF was to operationalize the deployment. And the case, again, is actively in court. As to the details of the battalions and mandate, that is operational, and I will not comment on that. Honorable Speaker, I think the point here is to assure the nation and to assure this House that the deployments are not arbitrary, the deployments are well thought out, and the oversight role of the National Assembly, as is required for gazettement and also defining the scope and duration, does not give room for misuse of the deployment operations. Senator Mungatana, thank you for expressing. We don't have a Defense Forces Act. The Part 2 of the Act does define the parameters, the scope of engagement, the code of conduct, who takes command for the various levels of deployment. But of course, again, Honorable Senator, this House is at liberty to review and ensure that any gaps that there are, then we should make sure, and we will be happy to engage to seal any loopholes that may be. But as it were, the Constitution, read together with the KDF Act. Senator, tuko na kesi nyingi ambazo ziko na shida, sina habari nayo. So utaweza kunielezea kwa sababu I have space at Mariakani, but you're welcome to bring that to the fore if indeed there is any such dispute between us and the community in Mariakani. Senator Murgor of West Pokot County. Senator, I appreciate again you have stated that the area is quiet, the North Rift is quieter, it's more conducive, but it is not devoid of challenges. And we engage on a very constant basis with our command at the North Rift. We have dealt with a few cases. So should you have any that is outstanding, please bring it to the fore. We have dealt with some cases, and we are still ready to deal with any that may be there. As indeed you have said, there is a lot of progress, but we have challenges here and there, and we can address them as they come. The Honorable Senator for Tharaka Nithi, the issue of recruitment. Mr. Speaker, allow me to say that sometime late last year, we got a fully fledged notification of recruitment with the recruitment going on. We have Kenyans masquerading as generals out there with full uniform, full ranks, and the likes. With that said, Mr. Speaker, I cannot also say that there are no challenges that we need to address with the system of recruitment. And I want to say that the Defense Council, which I chair, is currently working on a watertight system of recruitment, because the principles of national security that I mentioned, one of the key principles of national security is that the recruitment by the national security organs must reflect the diversity of the Kenyan people and must be in equitable proportions. We are working around the clock, and I know there is, without preempting, there is a question that has been raised on the same by this House, and when the time comes, I'll give details on the measures we are taking to seal the loopholes that do exist with our recruitment processes. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wabua Enoch, you had your supplementary question. And you know our rules standing on that. You only need to ask one. What is it that you want to say again?
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for indulging me. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of asking any supplementary question is to get an answer. So if you ask a supplementary question and you don't get an answer, then there is no point.
Seek clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to seek clarification. Mr. Speaker, and I don't want to push the CS to do things that maybe she is not allowed to do. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to understand, on my own behalf and on behalf of the people of Kenya, what is so secretive about just telling Kenyans what brigade or what battalion is engaged in whatever operation is taking place anywhere in the country. Mr. Speaker, the question was very specific. What battalion was deployed to deal with the cases on the streets in July? I think, Mr. Speaker, that question was the issue of Gazette notice. It's either just to say the Gazette notice has been lifted or it is still in force. Mr. Speaker, I don't see any issues with that. Mr. Speaker, let's get those answers. They're important for the people of this country. Thank you.
Senator Mbua, you know you have asked a question and then you're also giving yourself answers. What you should answer. Therefore, allow the CS to just make a comment on that operation in July last year. Madam CS, if you are not ready, then we can also get another.
I am very ready, Mr. Speaker. Yes, indeed, Senator Wambua. What restricts me from responding to your question is provisions of the law on limitation of information under the KDF law, and the questions on capacity and disposition of deployment falls under that limitation. So that is why I cannot extend beyond that. On the question on whether the deployment has been revoked, no, the deployment has not been revoked. There is a matter actively in court, but I would also want us to again remember that the deployment of June 25th is in support of the National Police Service, just like the other secondary operations that are within the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Also, I will request Senator Wambua, if you are not really satisfied, you can just walk to the office and then you can interact with the... No, I'm just...
Mr. Speaker, allow me to invite Senator Wambua.
Actually, I was making the way for him so that he can be able to reach your office. And you have been invited by the CS. Therefore, I think you can now do that. Senator Veronica Waheti Nduati.
Honorable CS, welcome back to the House, where you served for a few days, and congratulations on your new appointment. Lamu County is one of those counties that have experienced violent extremism. And we would want to know what is the current security situation in Lamu. Is KDF still actively deployed or is still open? And what is the current status of that deployment at Lamu County?
Honorable CS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Yes, the situation of Lamu, the security situation, remains a key involvement of the KDF, and the Operation Amani Boni is actively ongoing, as I had indicated, and the border remains closed.
Honorable CS, from my dashboard, you have no other supplementary questions. There are no other interventions. And therefore, I want to really congratulate you for availing yourself to the Senate and satisfactorily responding to all the supplementary questions without to and fro, forth and back. And this is a clear demonstration that women, the Kenya women, can be able to handle even the most extraneous duties. And I want to thank you and your peers again, you are our former colleagues. The way you are working together in that gelling is what we need in the ministries. So therefore, I don't want to say that it's because you are former legislators that you're able to know the issues that are facing Kenyans. So thank you very much indeed for your time. All the best as you serve Kenyans. Senator Haji Abdu Haji, kindly approach the table.
Next order.
Order number 8, motion, reports of the 63rd and 64th sessions, Rwanda, Angola, respectively.
Senator Deputy Speaker.
It notes the Pacific States, OACPS, Parliamentary Union, ACP-EU, Joint Parliamentary Assembly, June 2023, and 64th session of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States Parliamentary Assembly, and the first session, 6th December 2023, and Wednesday, 2nd October 2024, respectively. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, OACPS, was created by the Georgetown Agreement in 1975. It was established as an African, Caribbean, and Pacific during the same year, 1975. A cooperation agreement was established between the ACP and the EU, then referred to as the European Economic Community, EEC. The cooperation agreement was signed in Rome, Togo, and thus adopted the name Rome Convention. The Rome Convention guided the cooperation between the ACP and EU, that is Rome 1, Rome 2, Rome 3, and Rome 4 up to year 2000, when the Cotonou Partnership Agreement was signed between 78 ACP countries and the 28 European Union countries. The Cotonou Partnership Agreement was signed to govern cooperation between ACP and the EU for 20 years, up to the year 2020. The ACP Georgetown Agreement provides for an ACP summit as the highest governing organ, with a Council of Ministers as the policy-making organ, and a Committee of Ambassadors as the policy implementer. Kenya hosted the 9th ACP Summit in Nairobi in December 2019. During the summit, a revised version of the Georgetown Agreement was adopted. It was during the revision of the Georgetown Agreement that the new name for the ACP or ACPS was adopted. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Samoa Agreement is the framework for European Union relations with African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. It is the new partnership agreement between the EU and 79 countries from Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific, which totals to 79. 48 are African countries, 16 Caribbean, and 15 Pacific countries. The agreement includes a common foundation for all ACP levels, combined with the 3 regional protocols for Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific, with a focus on the region's specific needs. Mr. Speaker, the new agreement was officially signed on 15th of November 2023 by the EU and its member states and OACPS members in Samoa. Its provisional application was to start on the first day. The Samoa Agreement is based on 6 key priorities. Number 1, human rights, democracy, and governance. 2, peace and security. The first constitutive by Sakwera, President of the National Assembly, and Annalita Sitole from OACPS Parliament. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the Chief of the Defense Forces delivered a recorded video keynote speech as the outgoing President of OACPS and member of the OACPS Troika Kenya, and of the presidency of OACPS to Angola during the 10th OACPA Summit in December 2022. Then the need to overcome this challenge for effective functioning of the JPA. He concluded by restating Kenya's commitment to conflicts. For International Partnership, Njata Upurainen and Professor Fabricio Cardon, a political science Upurainen, who in a hundreds to the Assembly, and renegotiating the various partnership packages still run to ACP regions through the Global Gateway Africa with the OACPS, and ensure that people and communities remain central in efforts to address the inequality. The debate topics revolve around the renewed vigor of the partnership between OACPS and the European Union. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you are aware, Mr. Speaker, the OACPS, we attend these sessions between ourselves, the Senate, and also the National Assembly. And Mr. Speaker, if you recall, we have attended several sessions with you. I think it was in Brussels, Belgium, and all these issues that have been recorded here are true fact on what our deliberations has always been. So, Mr. Speaker, because I want to make a summary of the remaining bit, Mr. Speaker, the Samoa Agreement provides for the creation of regional parliamentary assemblies that comprise countries from Africa, Pacific, the Caribbean, and European Union. And this is actually a replica of what our colleague, Senator Mugatana, is doing in the Pan-African Parliament. So the Samoa Agreement is actually requesting that we should have these regional parliamentary assemblies so that we can be able to discuss our issues. Because as a region, we are affected by similar problems, similar challenges. So when we do parliamentary assemblies in the regions, we are able to canvass our issues in a better way. So the RPAs are co-chaired by a member of the European Parliament on the one hand, and a member of the Parliament from the respective African, Caribbean, or Pacific parties nominated as chair. The African region elected an MP from Mozambique, the Honorable Annalita Stole, while the European Parliament elected Mr. Carlos Zorino to represent the parties as co-chairs. The first plenary session took place on Sunday, 18 February 2024, to elect the Bureau members, consisting of two presidents, co-presidents of EU and OACPS, and the members of respective regional assemblies. Uganda's Deputy Speaker of Parliament, the Honorable Thomas Tayebwa, was elected as the president for the East African Bureau, which will represent Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Seychelles, Mauritius, Djibouti, Rwanda, and Burundi. And the Bureau, one each representing Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific, and EU, are executive bodies of the JPA. The main bureau consists of the two co-presidents, one each from EU and OACPS. Station in the co-presidency of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific was elected from Benin, Jamaica, and Samoa respectively. And Mr. Speaker, if you can remember, just 2 months ago, my colleague, the Deputy Speaker of the Uganda Parliament, was elected as the President of Africa Parliament. So we have a new leadership, and Mr. Honorable Thomas Tayebwa, and I congratulate him and wish him well as he leads our region. The Joint Parliamentary Assembly adopted the rules of the procedure which guides the operations of the assemblies. This report is a summary of the issues discussed at the recently concluded session of the OACPS EU JPA, many of which are very relevant to our existing situations. It is hoped that the subjects covered will generate rich and meaningful debate and inspire ideas that will help resolve issues of international and national concern, such as climate change, adaptation, and mitigation for Kenyans from a local context. The new session of the OACPS and joint OACPS EU Parliamentary Assemblies will be held in 2025 on a date to be announced. The regional assemblies will be held virtually in 2024. Speaker of the National Assembly. Senate notes This is Patana to second this report, and I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Kaduri, the nation and the Senate, what they managed to achieve when they went to represent us, the parliaments sitting out there discussed was the needs nations. It was discussed that there is need for developing cooperation with not only the traditional EU bloc, but also to look for a way to find cooperation with the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Mr. Speaker, this is a new bloc that has come up that is asserting its presence on the global arena. We have had in the past only the Western versus the Eastern powers. But Mr. Speaker, here we have the BRICS, which is a new clique, those members who represented us, and the views that our regional parliaments need to also shift focus and start finding a way to work with the BRICS. Why, Mr. Speaker? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, they came together, Mr. Speaker, themselves is for trade. They are not going to, they have done so well that is resulting in them moving in that direction. And what is it that we can learn, especially from Africa and the Pacific regions? What is it that parliaments from this African, that the African and the Pacific area parliaments should find a way to cooperate with the BRICS? Mr. Speaker, in one of the issues that was discussed, it's a common problem that some of the contribution, the assessed contributions to that organization from various states is failing. In fact, they said that 10 countries did not make a single contribution to the 2022 budget of that regional organization. So, Mr. Speaker, the question then begs, how does a nation join an international organization, sign its treaties, and then refuse to give its assessed contribution? Mr. Speaker, this is a challenge that we need to address, and my prayer is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Kenya will not be one of those that will be mentioned, and I'm sure they were not in this one. But we want them to, I want to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to urge the CS for Foreign Affairs and Diaspora Affairs, the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, together with the PS, Dr. Korir Ngoe, that they sit down and review all our memberships so that we do not be part of those countries that are described as 100% non-contribution countries, and yet you have signed to be in those organizations. It's really a shame. Mr. Speaker, in this particular meeting, our own president visited and was the guest of honor in that function to open the sitting of that parliament officially. So, Mr. Speaker, you can imagine if you are not contributing, the Foreign Affairs have not checked whether we are contributing, and then the president goes there as a guest of honor. I think these things should be checked, and I know they are listening to me in the ministry. Can they sit down and review all treaties where we are supposed to as a nation? I'm proud of the fact that whenever we go to the Pan-African Parliament, and we as Kenya never be mentioned as parliamentarians meeting there of the non-tariff barriers by the European Union. These policies, Mr. Speaker, they tend to be segregatory. They tend to be segregatory against products, agricultural products that are coming from Africa, animal products that are coming from Africa and Pacific nations. EU comes up with these standards, and these standards are hurting businesses from Africa, and from the Pacific region. This issue was discussed at length and Mr. Speaker, my prayer is that takes a lot of effort for our access to the markets in the European Union. And it is sad that now they are developing more products, and also products that was read to us and laid on this table have said that members raised concern about this. And I think EU, if it's to be genuine, some of the standards that they are creating, Mr. Speaker, are not genuine. Those are standards that are specifically created to exclude Pacific nations, African from their markets, and that from the expense of Africa and Pacific nations. And my prayer is that the EU will take note. And this is the reason why I have said, and I'm going back to the point that even as we work with the European Union, it is time for us to also look at the new kid on the block, BRICS. Because if we are able to tell the European Union your standards don't make sense, but we have our friends in China, our friends in Russia, our friends in India, the BRICS nation, then they will start treating us with dignity, because some of the standards and the requirements they make there, they make it impossible for our potatoes, for example, to reach the European markets. And yet, Mr. Speaker, we are supposed to be in the same block, we are supposed to be friends, we are supposed to be countries that are cooperating together. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that this issue was also debated in that parliament, and my prayer is that the European Union would not. Right now, Mr. Speaker, the European Union and countries to be, pandering to them. They are not going to be pandering to the European Union anymore. The new administration has been very tough on them in terms of putting up any, without hesitation, tariffs against their products whenever the situation calls for it. And so it is time also for the European Union to also look for new friends within this EU, within the Pacific, create a more friendly environment for us to be able to trade, because their traditional partner, the United States, is no longer as friendly as it used to be. So report and urge that our international engagements continue, so that the presence of Kenya and the presence of country across the world in various fora, I beg to second. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable Senators, I propose the question that the Senate notes the reports of the 63rd session of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States Parliamentary Assembly and the 43rd sessions of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific European Union Joint Parliamentary Assembly, second European Union Joint Parliamentary Assembly meetings held in Luanda, Angola from 17th to 21st February 2024, laid on the table respectively.
Tano, ilhari katika biashara na uhusiano ambayo inaendelea, Bwana Spika, hauonekani kwa Wakenya ama wananchi wa nchi ambazo zinahusika, Bwana Spika, kwa sababu majukumu makubwa ama mikutano yoyote ama miungano yoyote inafanywa inapaswa kuleta manufaa kwa wananchi wa nchi ambazo zinazohusika, Bwana Spika. Kwa sababu, Bwana Spika, wale ambao wametuchagua, wale ambao wametuweka katika nyadhifa, wanatuweka kwa sababu moja, Bwana Spika, kuinua hali ya maisha yao, Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo nataka kushukuru kwa sababu mikutano mingi inayofanya inaleta mahusiano mazuri, Bwana Spika, na vile vile, Bwana Spika, inafanya nchi ambazo zinahusika ziweze kuondoa hivyo spika wetu alivyosema katika mikutano ambayo wamekuwa wakijihusisha, wamewachagua viongozi wa nchi zingine, Bwana Spika. Hii uhusiano, Bwana Spika, kama ni alama na hali nzuri, Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo sitaki kuongea mengi, Bwana Spika, kwa sababu jambo kama hili litasaidia mpaka nchi jirani, itakuwa uhusiano huu unaendelea.
Asante, Senator. I call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to thank the two senators who have contributed to this report that we have been discussing in the ACP-EU summits. Senator Mugatana raised a very valid point about the subscriptions to these regional or international parliaments. And Mr. Speaker, you remember we were to attend ACP Parliament in Benin, Cotonou, Benin, in January this year, but the meeting was suspended because there were no finances. The countries that subscribe to OACPS and EU and did not pay the subscription, so it was very hard to finance that parliamentary session. So what Senator Mugatana has raised is something that really needs to be looked upon by the member states, so that on the benefits in their markets, they sometimes decline our products because they say we have maybe oversprayed, we have used more pesticides, more herbicides. And Mr. Speaker, you know, these are the people who produce these herbicides and all these chemicals. They dump them in Africa, but when we use them to produce our products, they decline. After they have sold their chemicals here, in Africa, we spray our crops, they become very energetic. So when we try to ship them back now so that they can utilize, they decline our products and say you have used the chemicals. So, Mr. Speaker, they use us to get their money, to get the market for their chemicals, industrial chemicals, but then when we sell to them, they start now blaming us. So, Mr. Speaker, these double standards should stop. They should produce chemicals that have no effect to them, of course, so that now when we farm with them, continue canvassing. You remember also, we have an issue that they said areas that have been deforested, especially you can't plant coffee without at least affecting a few trees here and there, or tea. And then they have seen areas that have deforested to produce those crops, they will discuss as OACPS EU parliamentary sessions. So, Mr. Speaker, with all these remarks, I beg to reply. And because there is no quorum, I also defer the putting of the question. Maybe you defer? I request, okay. I thought I have powers when standing here. I thought of the same powers that I enjoy while I'm chairing. I request you, Honorable Speaker, to the question. Sorry for that.
Senator Metho.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, if you indicted me on VINA, Mr. Speaker, sir,
Metho, what is your point of order? John Kinyo, sorry.
I have no point of order, Mr. Speaker.
John Kinyo, my apologies.
Mr. Speaker, I listened to the good senator of Nyandarua, John Metho, saying you indulge him, but what he said, I did not understand, Mr. Speaker. Does it relate to this Senate? How does it relate to this Senate, Mr. Speaker? Or to what he's about to present? Maybe he can clarify.
Honorable Speaker, it relates. Honorable Speaker, it relates to the extent that I am a senator and a member of this august House, and having right from Honorable Kanini Kega, now it has now come to the Senate, and also have even gone further to explain that in my leadership, we have started on a very positive note, that we have beaten Nyeri 13 sets to 3 is a very positive note, that we have beaten Nyeri 13 sets to 3 is a very, very rare feat. And Honorable Kenya should actually relax. The World Organization of Parliaments is a global forum for parliamentary dialogue, cooperation and action. The Union advances democracy and assists parliaments and parliamentarians throughout the world to fulfill their mandate, and the Assembly is made up of 108 members and 15 associate members. IPU facilitates parliamentary debate, dialogue, and cooperation. It also promotes and defends democracy and the rule of law. We are also assisting parliaments in coping with growing international agenda relevant to their parliaments in coping with growing international agenda relevant to their duties. Honorable Speaker, their duties. Honorable Speaker, their duties. Honorable Speaker, the IPU Assembly is the principal international problems and make recommendations. Mr. Speaker, on the 15th to the 17th of September. Mr. Speaker, on the 15th to the 17th of September 2023 in Hanoi, Vietnam. And it is actually a perfect green city. It is a city that looks like a city in a forest. The theme of the conference was the role of the youth in accelerating achievement of the SDGs through digital transformation and innovation. Honorable Speaker, since 2014, global conferences have addressed topical issues linked to the empowerment and have provided policy and security and the sustainable development. Parliamentarians took place 8 years after the adoption of the Hanoi Declaration on the sustainable development, the rising importance of technology and innovation to accelerate action towards the global goals. More specifically, the conference empowered young MPs to build knowledge and experience better positioning of themselves to perform their roles on timely topics such as digital transformation, innovation, and startups, and cultural and human values for sustainable development. Delegations were therefore encouraged to come prepared with examples of good practices to share with colleagues. And maybe especially the Kenyan story of the M-Pesa, our digital money transfer or digital money market, Honorable Speaker, which is something that fascinates the world, that from the comfort of your seat, Honorable Speaker, in the next not more than 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, you can be able to send as much money as you want to people in the towns of Masalani in your county. And I mean, it has made business very, very easy. It is this digital transformation and stories like this, Honorable Speaker, encompassed 3 primary sessions: digital transformation, innovation and startups, and promoting respect for cultural diversity in support of sustainable development. Mr. Speaker, sir, nearly 500 delegates, including 300 international delegates from 70 IPU member states and international organizations, gathered together, making it the biggest one since the conception of the Global Conference of Young Parliamentarians. The 3 primary thematic discussions received lively participation from the international delegates, with a digital transformation session featuring about 30 presentations. It is important, Honorable Speaker, that one that we made for Kenya. 30 presentations on the innovation and startups, 30 presentations on the innovation and startups, and 40 in the promoting this honored to lead. And another colleague of ours, during the conference, members of the Kenyan delegation were actively involved. Members of the Kenyan delegation were actively involved in the deliberations that greatly enriched the resolutions. Honorable Speaker, the contributions in my contribution during the General Assembly as the leader of the delegation, I highlighted Kenya's achievements thus far on our digital transformation and emphasized the generational responsibility of young legislators, urging them to ensure that they allocate resources to align with the declarations made during discussions. Honorable Speaker, this is a very critical departure that we got from Hanoi. That even as Honorable Speaker, and we cannot just keep saying that we want to empower our young people, but we don't allocate as much resources, Honorable Speaker, that will match this particular clarion cause that we keep making. More specifically to us, Honorable Speaker, who have been given an opportunity or have been given opportunities to serve as young members of Parliament, Honorable Speaker, both from the National Assembly and from the Senate, we must endeavor to try and convince it is important. Even as we continue budgeting money for capital projects, it is important. But this digital transformation and digital economy that it keeps speaking about, Honorable Speaker, we can only achieve to the extent that we want to achieve, Honorable Speaker, if we invest as much money. If we speak about the online jobs that are being done by our young people, Honorable Speaker, if we do not ensure that they have easy access to internet, Honorable Speaker, we'll be saying on one hand, but not be providing the requisite opportunities and the requisite tools of trade so that they can be able to achieve and they can be able to benefit from this particular scope of source of employment. Honorable Speaker, on behalf of the delegation, I would wish to thank the Office of the Speaker of the Senate and the clerk of the Senate for the continued support towards facilitating the activities of the Interparliamentary Union, ensuring that Kenya was well represented during that conference of young parliamentarians. And it is also important, Honorable Speaker, to say that even though the delegation of the members of the support team that we went with were drawn from the two houses, both the National Assembly and this Senate, Honorable Speaker, we had a very good team, and they were able to facilitate members, and they were able to facilitate including our presentations that we were making there, Honorable Speaker. And we would want to say, and we keep saying time from Parliament, I would want to encourage the clerk of the Senate, Mr. Jeremiah Nyagenya, to continue giving as many members of staff opportunities to showcase their knowledge and their professionalism with the delegations that keep moving. So the delegation that we were with Senator Asige, is a visually impaired person, and I'm sure if she was here, she would have confirmed that indeed the team that we had been given by the leadership of the Secretariat of the Senate was a good team. Mr. Speaker, sir, Article 7 of the IPU statutes mandate members of the IPU to submit the resolutions of the IPU within the respective parliaments in the most appropriate form, to communicate them to the government and stimulate their implementation to enforce of the steps taken and the results obtained. Accordingly, Honorable Speaker, in accordance with Article 7 of the Statutes of the IPU and the conference statement and the necessary action. Mr. Speaker, sir, I therefore beg to move and request Senator Veronica Waheti Duarte Maina to second.
Of this report, and let me at the very onset congratulate the Kenyan delegation that represented Kenya ably. Senator John Muthia Methu, happy to note today the hair looks very smart. Senator Christo Asige, our very own able senator who represents persons living with disability at the Senate. Honorable delegates are greatly involved in the deliberations that enriched the resolutions that were arrived at, which is what a delegation should always do, especially when they represent our nation anywhere. It's important that a report is returned, that the participation, the deliberations, and the resolutions that emanate from any conference, because ideally that's why the taxpayer uses the money to sponsor our delegation. I have noted with a lot of interest the venue where this conference was taken. That was in Hanoi. Kenyans lately, because of whose fate is hanging on the thread, because of having been convicted for a capital punishment, due to that Vietnam on young parliamentarians, and Duta is a young woman. I have seen for the last maybe a week or so, a very hearted petition by Kenyans to the government to quickly do what it can to be allowed to face the Kenyan judicial system. That many countries and jurisdictions are very strict on drug offenses and drug charges, and it is very important they are transporting or what suitcases they are handling when they are traveling, so that they don't find themselves in the situation that Nduta found herself in. And we want to thank the PS Foreign Affairs for taking steps to reach out to the government. Because we know an offense could be an offense, we do not know how the process went, but we do know that the Kenyan judicial system is also eager to enforce the criminal law jurisdiction. And I'm sure if Duta was returned here, she would still face the Kenyan judicial system, which may be lighter for the family. So we continue to hope that the governments will discuss and see that the fate of Duta is reviewed and that she can face the music back home. Notably, Kenya has no bilateral agreement with Vietnam, and maybe it's time that because the Kenyan embassy, so that I don't even know how our team worked during this time, the delegation that was sent, they must have had a lot of difficulties because they did not have, Kenya does not have a mission down at Vietnam. And we would also urge the PS, Foreign Affairs, to ensure that now that Kenya and Vietnam have relations that could enable us to foster or put a foreign mission there, to consider that there are many Kenyans who are working within Vietnam, and that they will be it will be a big honor and great service to those Kenyans if there was a foreign mission or a diplomatic mission that can serve them closer in Vietnam, because both countries have interests, issues that are of common interest that could be handled by that foreign mission. And having said that, I'm wishing consolation to Nduta's family back in Murang'a. Honorable Speaker, the theme of this conference, coming back to the report, was the role of the... If I can jump to one of the items that were noted by the Secretary General during this presentation of young women in Parliament, digital transformation and innovation. He underscored the crucial role of young women and called for increased effort to ensure their meaningful participation in parliamentary processes. The reason why the young women were singled out, Honorable Speaker, must have been because it is very easy for women to be left behind in digital transformation. And Honorable Speaker, it's my view that as our systems get more digitized, become more technologically efficient, it's important that women are carried along. In fact, Honorable Speaker, if you look at what is happening now, commerce has gone digital, trading has gone digital, Honorable Speaker, and everything, even the service delivery by governments has gone digital. And unless we carry the women along in this digital transformation, women will take the shorter end of the stick in this transformation. And that is why women can be carried along, even those who are in parliaments, to ensure that their role as women parliamentarians becomes meaningful, even as people participate in parliamentary processes. Honorable Speaker, right now, you might find that the people who are able to follow the proceedings, even in these parliaments, are those who are digitally aware or digitally informed. And it's important, Honorable Speaker, that as we continue, that parliaments become a center where even those who are serving within parliaments, their skills are consistently improved in this digital technology and transformation. Honorable Speaker, the resolutions that have been arrived at during this conference, Honorable Speaker, should actually be turned into action so that, Honorable Speaker, we do not have conferences being attended to, resolutions being drawn, and no action being taken. We need to be in a phase where we say, from resolutions now to action, from action to impact, so that whatever resources are being used in these conferences, the global conferences, can become a reality to the citizens of Kenya. So let me once again congratulate the team that represented Kenya in this IPU Global Conference, and hope that this will impact the other young parliamentarians within our jurisdiction. And with those many remarks, I now second this motion. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
That the Senate notes report of the 9th Interparliamentary Union Global Conference of Young Parliamentarians held in Hanoi, Vietnam from 15th to 17th September 2023, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 5th March 2024.
Thank you very much. Report. Mr. Speaker, first of all, and his leadership. Mr. Speaker, Senator Methu, our former chair for lands, has distinguished himself, Mr. Speaker, in this House and the service. I wish him well, and I pray that the people of Nyandarua will keep bringing you back so that when we finally go, we will bring this IPU in innovation and startups. And there was a session on promoting respect for cultural diversity in support of sustainable development. There, solutions that are passed there with resources in this country. The government about digital transformation and then digital economy and pushing that idea. Mr. Speaker, in our own county, when the president visited there last month, we were able to launch, Speaker, there were young people there who are in Hola and who gave testimony that we finished university. And I personally, and I started participating, and now I really want to thank this administration. And we will get more and more innovation, the young parliamentarians in IPU, and it is being applied here. And we want to say that what has been done is good, but more resources to be allocated so something can continue to happen in our various, on innovation and startups. And this is where my disappointment is in the government that I support. Mr. Speaker, a lot of our people in Tana River, and I have a young man who is actually a teacher, but he described himself as an innovator. He can actually create a lot of things, make a bicycle, produce, and able to put some, Mr. Speaker, where is the support on people like this? We have seen, even in other areas of this country, young people who are able to create something that looks like a plane and something that has actually taken off, although not for a long time, for startups. People are able, Mr. Speaker, and not just in Tana River County, but in many other counties, Mr. Speaker, young people have known that it is not just education. We have content creators who are making money. We have people who are actually doing something in the field of innovation and startups, as discussed in the IPU. But, Mr. Speaker, where is this money where we can say that in these 47 counties, we have allocated 5 million shillings or 100 million shillings or 20 million shillings for each of these counties, so that the most innovative young people can be given access to this funding so that they create their own startups. Mr. Speaker, I attempted to meet a young man who had come up with something that, some machine that is able to irrigate the land for purposes of agriculture, using very simple technology. Mr. Speaker, the question that was there is, and he was using this technology of the phone, so that he's in apps. I think we need to tell our government and the ministers who are in charge, Article 7 of the IPU statutes have mandated our delegation to come and say here in this country, to come in this country. And therefore, as we debate this matter in this Senate, we are asking the Minister in Treasury and the relevant sector minister who is in the microeconomic sector to please come up with a fund that is specifically for youth that can be able to support our youth across the counties. I know, Mr. Speaker, that many counties have come up with funds to support business in general. But here, I'm speaking about funds that will support innovation, specifically. Fund was a very useful session, and it has opened the minds of many, many people, and we are happy that IPU is thinking in this direction, and we pray that our members will continue to support us and help us to go in the right direction. Sustainable development. Mr. Speaker, on that session, I just wanted to say one thing, to be a guest of honor in Pwani University in our neighboring Kilifi County. They had a huge cultural day. And Mr. Speaker, one of the things I said, yes, we have very many cultures, very many diverse cultures within the university there. And those different cultural diversities should be our strength. I felt that identifying people through their tribes, tribal allegiance, wasn't really what I had hoped would be happening amongst our children. My prayer was that people would be identifying themselves in terms of counties, so that County X, County Y. Speaker, tribes in Kenya eventually will die. And they will die, and I'm saying this because the kind of generation that we are raising, Mr. Speaker, is a Kenyan generation. And we should put all effort to create a Kenyan tribe, if you like, but not promote necessarily certain tribes. We want Kiswahili to be the language that we will be speaking. And obviously, we want these nations to raise a continent called Africa, so that you will be happy to be in. Thank
you. Senator Mungatana, you will have a balance of 2 minutes when this debate resumes. Honorable Senators, it is now 1 p.m., time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate stands adjourned until later today, Wednesday, 19th March 2025 at 2:30 p.m.
I'm cognizant that we have a very short amount of time with Tata, and I think there's a lot that we want to get from him. But first, I'll go into today's Who Said That. This person was the 44th president of the United States, the first president of his kind from the US. And who said that?
Barack.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I quote that election in there.
Yeah.
And look where we are.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
What do you think of those words? I think they're right. It's fairly right. I've always used the analogy of the prison when I look at and I try to understand what hit us. I'll see Kenya as one big prison where every 5 years we get an opportunity to choose the chief warden. And the campaign among the wardens with the chief warden can be vicious and bloody.
Wow.
Then, after the elections, and when you look at the manifestos that they have, none of them talk about breaking the prison. They talk about improving life within the prison. None of them talk about breaking the prison. And so that rivalry usually ends. Occasionally there's an attempted prison break. There's an attempted jail break like the Gen Zs did the other day. Then you'll see these vulture politicians circling around like they're circling around their prey. And they become equal and they say that there should be no jailbreak. That's what is happening in this country. Some of us have been planning and trying to organize a jailbreak, and we continue organizing.
Some of the prisoners, or a majority of the prisoners, are actually okay.
Yes, usually when people feel helpless. Today I was just reading some article. There was this case whereby a leopard was chasing a dog. But what happened is that the toilet had been locked from the other side. None of them could escape. So instead of the leopard going to chew the dog, the leopard retreated into a corner, and the dog remained shivering. To a wild animal is freedom. The moment the leopard realized he could not get out, it was done.
Wow.
So many people have come to that realization that now that they cannot get out, the best they can do is to see how they can improve their life within the prison, be obedient to the prisoners, create free to the wardens, try to create friendships with the wardens so they can get some favors here and there. And you see when the president moves around, he moves around with a bag of goodies. There you do kids, give some paramenta here and there. So he doesn't follow the budget. He moves around with goodies. So the president now becomes a source of goodies. And that's what damages parliament, damages the judiciary, damages everything. So the president becomes out of the prison. They make lemonade, they have a lemon.
I know. I'm curious to hear from you. What do you think our biggest corruption issue in Kenya is? Is it our ODS debt? Would you say that everything else stems from the fact that we cannot pay our way out of this debt, out of how overtaxed we are? What, in your thoughts, is the
biggest corruption issue? Is the disregard for the law. Disregard for the law is the source of all. The source is disregard for the law. Even power in this country is acquired and retained outside the law. Then it's a law of the jungle. So the foreign debt, all these things are just symptoms of disregard for the law. What we need to fix is fidelity to the law. Make nobody above the law. No brute, no saint should be above the law.
Right.
All should be under the law. And that's where we have to get.
You've been known as being very litigious. People like to use that word. But the why may not be very well understood. Why is Okiya Omtata in court challenging whether it's government, whether it's private sector, telcos, whomever? Why the court route?
One, I've got very big faith in the law because even if you look at God on Creation Day, he gave Adam and Eve the law to govern them. And the day they broke the law, they lost paradise. So the law is very key in terms of organizing. That's the manual for living on earth is the rule of law. Human beings have no capacity to govern themselves. They can only be governed by the law. They have to be put under a system that restricts them to the narrow and straight. So the judiciary, for me, is an area where you are able to remind people of that. And when you get a court order, it's a court order. It has declared, it has realized this. And also sometimes when you go to court, people think that winning is having a judgment in your favor. Sometimes you win even by not winning, because the court will clarify the issues. That's what you should look for. And that's